It started with a red dress. Not just any dress, this was the kind of dress that stopped conversations. She wore it to a charity gala we attended last month, a swanky event organized by one of her clients. Emily, my wife of 12 years, looked stunning, effortlessly charming everyone around her. I was proud to be by her side, even as she floated through the room like she belonged in another world, one of glittering chandeliers and whispered secrets. But something about that night wouldn't leave me alone. It wasn't just the dress. It was the way she laughed at certain jokes, the way her hand lingered on someone's arm for a fraction too long. Nothing obvious, just off. When I caught her standing too close to one of the men, a tall, silver-haired guy who oozed wealth, I told myself I was imagining things. Jealousy was petty, and Emily deserved to feel admired. After all, wasn't that what I loved about her? How effortlessly she lit up a room. The night passed, and life moved on. But then came the whispers. Friends dropping hints about business trips Emily hadn't mentioned. Our neighbor, Mrs. Crawford, made a passing comment about Emily's car parked at the golf club late one afternoon when I thought she was working. It wasn't long before I found myself piecing together odd details, each one more troubling than the last. A missed dinner here, an unfamiliar cologne on her coat there. The foundation of our marriage, which I'd once thought unshakable, began to feel like quicksand. And then, last Friday, everything came to a head. I thought I knew betrayal, but nothing prepared me for what I stumbled into that night. Friday started like any other day. Work had been a drag all week, and by the time I clocked out, I was ready to collapse on the couch with a beer. Emily had mentioned she'd be working late, another client dinner, she said. It had become so routine I didn't question it anymore. I should have. I drove home, listening to the local sports station drone on about the team's latest trade. My mind wandered to the weekend, maybe we could take a break, just the two of us. It had been months since we'd done anything together. I was still thinking about that when I turned onto our street and saw headlights pulling out of our driveway. I slowed down instinctively, squinting through the dim glow of the streetlights. It was Emily's car. At first, I thought she must have forgotten something and come home quickly to grab it, but then I realized she wasn't driving. The car glided past me, and in that brief moment, I caught a glimpse of her in the passenger seat. She wasn't alone. A man was driving. They didn't notice me, but I noticed them. I pulled into the driveway, heart racing. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but everything about the situation screamed wrong. Her car. Another man. Leaving our house when she was supposed to be at a client dinner. I sat in my car for a few minutes, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Maybe there was a logical explanation. Maybe it was a coworker giving her a ride to the dinner. But why leave from home? Why not just meet there? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. I parked and walked into the house. It was quiet, eerily so. The kind of quiet you notice when it feels out of place. There was no sign of Emily having been there recently. Her shoes weren't by the door, her purse wasn't on the kitchen counter. Nothing. Yet her car had just been in the driveway. I didn't even bother taking my jacket off. Instead, I grabbed my own keys and headed back out. I didn't know where they were going, but I wasn't about to sit around wondering. I drove slowly down the street, hoping to catch sight of her car. It wasn't hard, there aren't many places to go in our neighborhood on a Friday night, and her car stood out among the others. They didn't head toward downtown or any of the upscale restaurants Emily liked to frequent with her clients. No, they turned onto a side street I recognized as leading to the Westmore Hotel. My stomach tightened as I followed them, careful to keep my distance. The Westmore wasn't the kind of place you went for a quick drink or a casual dinner. It was known for its privacy, popular among business executives and people who didn't want to be seen. I parked across the street, watching as they pulled into the lot. The man got out first. He was tall, maybe mid-40s, wearing a suit that looked tailored. He walked around to Emily's side and opened the door for her. She stepped out, laughing at something he said, her hand brushing his arm as she did. My chest felt like it was about to cave in. I stayed in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I didn't know what to do. My first instinct was to march across the street, demand answers right there in the parking lot. But something held me back. Maybe it was the shock, maybe it was the sheer disbelief that this was actually happening. So I sat there, watching as they disappeared into the hotel lobby. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. I told myself I was being paranoid, that this could all still be innocent. But deep down, I knew better. People don't check into the Westmore Hotel for innocent reasons. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I got out of my car and crossed the street, my mind racing. I didn't have a plan, no idea what I'd do if I found them. I just knew I needed to know the truth. Inside, the lobby was quiet, almost too polished. A young woman at the front desk looked up and smiled as I walked in. I felt completely out of place, like everyone in the room knew why I was there and was silently judging me for it. I tried to act casual, scanning the room for any sign of Emily or the man she was with. Nothing. I walked up to the desk, my heart pounding. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm supposed to meet my wife here, but I think I may have missed her. She's staying here with a colleague. Could you check for me?" The receptionist frowned slightly. "Do you know the room number?" I shook my head. "No, I don't. I think she just checked in a little while ago. Her name's Emily Matthews." She hesitated, clearly debating whether or not to give me any information. I leaned in, lowering my voice. "Look, I just need to know if she's here. It's kind of an emergency." She nodded slowly, typing something into her computer. "It looks like she checked in about 20 minutes ago. Room 315. I mumbled a thank you and headed for the elevator, my legs feeling like lead. Room 315. The number burned in my mind as I rode up to the third floor, every second stretching into an eternity. When the doors opened, I stepped out and turned down the hall, scanning the numbers until I found it. I stood outside the door for a long time, my hand hovering over the handle. I could hear muffled voices on the other side, indistinct but unmistakably familiar. Emily's laugh, softer now, followed by a deeper voice. I clenched my fists, trying to decide what to do. Burst in? Knock? Walk away and pretend I never saw any of this? I didn't knock. I didn't barge in. Instead, I turned and walked away, my head spinning. I needed a plan. I needed proof. More than anything, I needed time to process what I'd just discovered. This wasn't something I could confront her about without being absolutely certain. Whatever was happening in that room, it would change everything. I didn't sleep that night. I tried, but every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was her laughing, brushing her hand against that guy's arm, and disappearing into the hotel. By the time morning rolled around, I was running on coffee and adrenaline. I decided that the waiting, the guessing, and the assumptions had to end. If she was going to destroy the life we had built together, she'd have to look me in the eyes while doing it. Emily came home around 9 a.m. the next day. She walked in casually, like it was just another Saturday morning. She even had a tray of coffee cups in her hand, one of which she set on the counter in front of me with a smile. "I brought you your favorite," she said, as if nothing had happened. I stared at her for a moment, trying to gauge her mood, to see if there was any sign of guilt. There wasn't. Her hair was perfect, her makeup intact, no indication that she'd just spent the night at a hotel with another man. That casual confidence, that audacity, made my blood boil. "Where were you last night?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She blinked, caught off guard. "I told you, I had a late dinner with a client." "Dinner that turned into an overnight stay?" I shot back, standing up from the kitchen table. "Spare me the bullshit, Emily. I saw you. I saw you leave this house with some guy in your car, and I followed you to the Westmore Hotel." The color drained from her face. She froze, the coffee cup halfway to her lips, as the words hit her. For a moment, she just stared at me, her eyes wide with shock. Then she put the cup down and crossed her arms defensively. "Daniel, you're being ridiculous. That was work-related, she said, her tone edging toward condescending. You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't, I snapped, cutting her off. Don't stand there and lie to me. I saw you, Emily. I saw the way you looked at him, the way you laughed at his jokes. That wasn't work-related. That was personal. She rolled her eyes, a gesture that sent me over the edge. Fine, I said, my voice rising. Then explain it to me. Explain why you were at a hotel with him for over an hour. Explain why you didn't come home until this morning. Go ahead. She hesitated, her eyes darting toward the door like she was calculating an escape route. You don't understand, she said finally. It's complicated. I let out a bitter laugh. Complicated? You're my wife, Emily. It doesn't get more straightforward than that. Either you're faithful or you're not. So which is it? She looked down, avoiding my gaze. Her hands fidgeted with the edge of the counter, her usual composure starting to crack. It wasn't what you think, she mumbled. Then what was it? I pressed, stepping closer. Because from where I was sitting, it sure as hell looked like you were sneaking around with another man. She looked up then, her eyes brimming with frustration and something else. Fear? Guilt? You're not perfect, Daniel, she snapped. Don't act like this is all on me. That caught me off guard. What the hell are you talking about? I demanded. She gestured vaguely, her voice rising. You're always so focused on work, on your projects. Half the time, it feels like I'm married to your damn drafting table. Do you even notice me anymore? Do you care about anything besides your stupid deadlines? Don't try to turn this around on me, I shot back. This isn't about work. This is about you betraying me. Her eyes flashed with anger, and for a moment, I thought she might deny it again. But then she sighed, her shoulders slumping. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she said quietly. I stared at her, my chest tightening. So it's true, I said, my voice hollow. You cheated. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked away, her jaw tight. I don't know what you want me to say, she said finally. It just happened. It just happened? I repeated, my voice shaking with disbelief. That's your excuse? You just accidentally fell into bed with someone else? It's not like that, she said, her voice rising again. You think this was easy for me? You think I wanted this? I didn't, Daniel. I didn't plan for this to happen. But it did, I said, cutting her off. You made a choice. You chose to betray me. And now, you don't even have the decency to own up to it. She glared at me, her hands balled into fists. What do you want from me? She snapped. An apology? Fine. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry I wasn't perfect. I'm sorry I needed something more than what you were giving me. That hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I shook my head, my voice barely above a whisper. You're unbelievable. She sighed, rubbing her temples like she was the one who'd been wronged. Look, I know I messed up, she said. But we can fix this. We can go to therapy, talk to someone. No, I said sharply, cutting her off again. You don't get to cheat on me and then act like we're just one counseling session away from fixing this. You don't get to destroy our marriage and then expect me to clean up the mess. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her expression. You don't mean that, she said, her voice trembling slightly. You can't just give up on us. I'm not the one who gave up, I said, my voice cold. You did that the moment you walked into that hotel with him. She stared at me, her face pale. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. Then she turned away, her shoulders shaking. I didn't know if she was crying or just trying to pull herself together. At that moment, I didn't care. I walked past her, grabbing my keys off the counter. I need some air, I said over my shoulder. Don't be here when I get back. I didn't wait for her response. I slammed the door behind me and got into my car, my hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay in that house. Not with her. Not after everything she'd just admitted. I drove aimlessly for hours after I left the house, the same question looping through my mind: how could she do this to me? For 12 years, I had been her husband. I worked hard, I stayed faithful, I built a life for us, and for what? To be blindsided by her selfishness? I couldn't let this slide. She had made her choice, and now, it was time for me to make mine. By the time I pulled into a diner off the highway, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to scream, cry, or beg her to stay. Emily had betrayed me, and I needed to take control of the situation, not to salvage our marriage, but to make sure she felt the consequences of her actions. I wasn't interested in petty revenge. I wanted to hit her where it would hurt most: her pride, her reputation, her life. I spent the next few days planning meticulously. She wasn't going to see it coming. The first step was to gather evidence. I didn't want to rely on just what I'd seen at the hotel. I needed concrete proof that would stand up if things escalated. So, I hired a private investigator. The PI was a no-nonsense type, a retired cop who came highly recommended. I told him I suspected my wife was having an affair, gave him the name of the Westmore Hotel, and described the man I'd seen with her. "I'll get you what you need," he said simply. It didn't take long. 2 days later, he handed me a folder full of photographs and detailed reports. Emily had been meeting this guy Brian, as it turned out, for months. Dinner dates, late-night rendezvous, even trips out of town. There was no ambiguity. The evidence was damning, and as I flipped through the pictures, my initial fury gave way to cold determination. Next, I focused on our finances. Emily and I had always kept our accounts separate, but we shared a joint savings account and owned the house together. I wasn't about to let her walk away with half of everything after what she'd done. I called my lawyer, a sharp woman named Laura who had handled a property dispute for me a few years back. I trusted her to be thorough and ruthless. "Emily's cheating," I told her bluntly. "I want a divorce, and I want to protect my assets." Laura didn't flinch. "Do you have proof?" "I do," I said, handing over the folder from the PI. She leafed through it quickly, nodding in approval. "This is good. Adultery is still considered grounds for divorce in this state. We'll use this to push for an unequal division of property. You'll need to freeze the joint account immediately and document any shared assets." Within hours, I had locked Emily out of our joint savings. I also opened a new account and transferred my paychecks and personal savings into it. She wouldn't have access to a dime of my money going forward. Laura helped me draft a list of all the assets in both our names, from the house to the car to the furniture. She assured me that with the evidence of Emily's infidelity, the court would likely side with me. Then came the social aspect. Emily had always prided herself on her image, her career in PR depended on it. She cultivated this perfect persona, the polished professional with a loving husband and a picture-perfect life. Well, I decided it was time for everyone to see the cracks. The weekend after our confrontation, I invited a few close friends over for a barbecue. These were mutual friends, people who had known us as a couple for years. Emily wasn't home, she had gone to visit her sister, though I suspected she was really with Brian. That worked to my advantage. As we sat around the fire pit, I let the truth slip. "I think Emily and I are splitting up," I said casually. The reaction was immediate. "What?" "Why?" one of our friends, Claire, asked. I shrugged, feigning reluctance. "I found out she's been cheating on me." You could have heard a pin drop. "You're joking," someone said. "I wish I were," I replied, pulling out my phone. I had prepared for this moment, saving a few of the less explicit photos from the PI's report. I passed my phone around, letting them see a picture of Emily and Brian kissing outside a restaurant. Claire's face turned red with anger. "That's disgusting. How could she do that to you?" "She's been seeing him for months," I said quietly, shaking my head. I didn't want to believe it, but here we are. Word spread fast. By the end of the weekend, nearly everyone in our social circle knew about Emily's affair. I didn't have to say much, just a few well-placed comments and the evidence to back it up. People who had admired her, respected her, began to see her differently. I didn't need to smear her name, her actions did that for me. The final step was confronting Brian. I wasn't looking for a fight, I wanted to make him uncomfortable, to make him realize the mess he'd gotten himself into. I found out where he worked, a mid-sized law firm downtown, and showed up unannounced during his lunch break. He was sitting in the lobby when I walked in, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone. I approached him calmly, stopping a few feet away. "Brian?" He looked up, startled. "Yeah? I'm Daniel," I said. "Emily's husband." His face drained of color. He stammered something unintelligible, but I didn't let him get far. "I just wanted to thank you," I said evenly. "You've made this whole process a lot easier for me. The divorce, I mean. Judges don't look kindly on adultery, especially when there's this much evidence." I saw the panic in his eyes as the implications hit him. "Look, man, I didn't." "Save it," I interrupted. "I don't care about your excuses. Just stay out of my way. And if you think you're going to have some fairy tale ending with her, think again. She'll do to you what she did to me. It's only a matter of time." With that, I turned and walked out, leaving him sitting there, his coffee forgotten on the table. By the time I returned home that evening, I felt lighter. Emily had betrayed me, but I wasn't going to let her destroy me. I had taken back control of my life, my finances, my reputation. She could keep her excuses, her guilt, her lies. All I wanted was for her to be gone, and soon, she would be. By the time Emily returned home on Sunday evening, the house was empty of any warmth it had once held. The air felt stale, and the distance between us was a chasm. I had spent the weekend boxing up her personal belongings. Her clothes, toiletries, books, everything that was distinctly hers. I stacked the boxes neatly in the corner of the living room, leaving nothing for her to misinterpret. It was over, and I wanted her to know it the moment she walked through the door. When she entered, she froze, her eyes scanning the stacked boxes and then meeting mine. I was seated on the couch, a cold expression on my face. She closed the door behind her cautiously, like a thief caught in the act. "What's this?" she asked, gesturing toward the boxes. "It's your life, Emily," I said flatly. "You can take it and go." She swallowed hard, her face a mixture of guilt and anger. "So that's it? You're just throwing me out?" "You threw yourself out the second you decided to cheat," I replied, my voice calm but sharp. "I'm just making it official." She sighed, dropping her purse onto the counter. "Daniel, I've told you I'm sorry. I don't know how many times I have to say it. I made a mistake, a huge mistake. But don't you think we owe it to ourselves to try and fix this?" I stood up slowly, folding my arms across my chest. "Fix what, Emily? Fix the fact that you betrayed me? Fix the months of lying? There's nothing left to fix. You didn't just cheat on me. You destroyed the trust, the foundation of this marriage. And you want me to pretend that we can just patch it up like nothing happened?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel the usual pang of sympathy that I once might have. "You think this is easy for me," she snapped. "I've been beating myself up over this every day. I hate what I did, but I hate even more that you won't even give me a chance to make it right." I laughed bitterly. "Make it right? Emily, there is no making this right. You made a choice, and now you have to live with the consequences. I gave you everything, my time, my love, my loyalty. And you gave it to someone else." "I was lonely," she shouted, her voice breaking. "Do you even realize how distant you've been these last few years? Always working late, always more focused on your career than on us. I didn't feel like I had a husband anymore, I felt like I had a roommate. Brian made me feel wanted." The name felt like a slap in the face, but I didn't flinch. I stared her down, my expression unwavering. "So that's your excuse? I didn't give you enough attention, So you ran to another man? You could have talked to me, Emily. You could have told me how you felt. But instead, you decided to crawl into bed with someone else. That's not loneliness, that's selfishness. Her shoulders sagged, and she wiped at her eyes. I know, she said quietly. I know I screwed up. But I love you, Daniel. I don't want to lose you. Love? I said, shaking my head. Don't insult me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. Love isn't about words, Emily. It's about actions. And your actions have made it perfectly clear how you feel. She took a step closer, her hands clasped together in a pleading gesture. Please, don't do this. Don't throw everything away. We've been through so much together. Don't let one mistake define our entire marriage. I held up my hand to stop her. One mistake? This wasn't a one-time thing, Emily. I know about the months of lies, the dinners, the hotel rooms. You didn't just betray me once, you betrayed me over and over again. And every time, you chose him. So don't stand there and act like this was some momentary lapse in judgment. She was sobbing now, her mascara smudged and her face red. But I didn't feel pity, just a dull, simmering anger. I want a divorce, I said firmly. I've already spoken to a lawyer. The papers will be ready in a few days. Her head snapped up, her tear-streaked face filled with shock. You've already started the process? Yes, I said simply. And I've frozen our joint accounts. You can take your personal savings, but the rest will be decided in court. Her mouth opened and closed like she wanted to argue, but no words came out. Finally, she whispered, "This is really it, isn't it?" "It is," I said. "I can't forgive you, Emily. I can't live with someone who betrayed me like this. It's over." She sat down on the edge of the couch, burying her face in her hands. "I don't know where to go," she murmured. "I don't know what to do." I looked at her, my expression cold. "That's not my problem anymore. You made your bed, now you can lie in it." For a long moment, we sat in silence, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on us. Finally, I broke the stillness. "You should start packing," I said. "I want you out by the end of the week." She didn't respond. She just sat there, broken and defeated. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a sense of closure. Emily had made her choices, and now I had made mine. There was no going back. I walked out of the living room and headed upstairs, leaving her to sit alone with the ruins of what she had destroyed. I closed the door to my bedroom now, and for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of peace. Not happiness, not relief, but the quiet certainty that I had done the right thing. The house was eerily quiet in the days that followed. Emily moved out that Thursday. I wasn't home when she left, I made sure of it. I didn't need to see her pack up the remnants of her life or hear her last-ditch pleas for reconciliation. By the time I returned, the house felt emptier, not just in the physical sense, but in a way that underscored the finality of her departure. I walked through the rooms, noticing the absence of her presence in every corner. The bathroom counter was bare where her makeup had once cluttered the space. The closet was half empty, my suits hanging neatly where her colorful dresses had once been. Even the smell of her perfume, a faint trace that used to linger in the air, was gone. It felt strange at first, like I was living in someone else's house. But as the days passed, the stillness grew comforting. For the first time in weeks, I could think clearly. I didn't have to walk on eggshells, bracing myself for lies or half-truths. The space was mine again, and I was finally free to figure out what came next. My first priority was putting my life back in order. The divorce process moved quickly, thanks to my lawyer, Laura. Emily didn't contest anything. Whether it was guilt or a lack of fight left in her, she signed the papers without much resistance. We agreed on an unequal division of assets. I kept the house, the bulk of our savings, and my retirement accounts. She left with enough to start over but not enough to make things easy for her. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about protecting what I had worked for, what I had built on my own. If she wanted a new life, she could have it, but not at my expense. With the divorce underway, I turned my focus to myself. I'd spent so much time being angry, hurt, and betrayed that I'd neglected my own well-being. I started going back to the gym, a routine I had let slide over the years. There was something cathartic about pushing my body to its limits, channeling the anger into something productive. Slowly, I began to feel stronger, not just physically, but emotionally. I also reconnected with friends I'd drifted away from. For years, Emily had been the social one, the one who maintained our connections. After her betrayal, I realized how much I had isolated myself, relying on her to fill that role. I reached out to old friends, apologized for my absence, and began rebuilding those relationships. It wasn't easy at first. Some people didn't know how to act around me, unsure of what to say about the divorce. But over time, those barriers fell away, and I found myself surrounded by people who genuinely cared. About 2 months after Emily moved out, I ran into Brian. It happened unexpectedly, in the parking lot of a grocery store. I was loading my car when I noticed him walking toward his own vehicle. For a moment, we locked eyes. He froze, clearly unsure of what to do. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The look on my face must have said it all, because he quickly averted his gaze and hurried to his car. As he drove off, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, not because I had scared him, but because I realized I didn't feel any lingering hatred toward him. He wasn't worth my energy anymore. None of it was. The hardest part of moving on was facing the quiet moments, the times when I was alone with my thoughts. At first, I would replay everything over and over in my head: her lies, the confrontation, the moment I knew it was truly over. But as time passed, those memories lost their sharp edges. They became more like background noise, faint echoes that no longer had the power to hurt me. One evening, as I sat on the back porch with a drink in hand, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Sad, maybe, but not angry. Emily's betrayal had been a devastating blow, but it hadn't broken me. If anything, it had forced me to confront the parts of myself I had neglected, the parts that needed healing, growth, and change. I started journaling, something I hadn't done since college. Writing helped me process everything, giving me a sense of control over my own narrative. I didn't want to be defined by what had happened to me. I wanted to take ownership of my story, to find meaning in the pain and use it as a stepping stone to something better. Eventually, I began dating again, not because I was looking for something serious, but because I wanted to remind myself that life goes on. The first few dates were awkward, filled with small talk and the occasional uncomfortable question about my past. But as I met more people, I started to feel a spark of excitement again. I wasn't ready for a relationship, but I was ready to see what was out there. One of the women I met, a teacher named Claire, was particularly kind and understanding. We didn't hit it off romantically, but she became a good friend, someone I could talk to about anything without fear of judgment. Through her, I learned to trust again, to open myself up to the possibility of connection without the baggage of betrayal weighing me down. Looking back now, I realize that Emily's affair didn't just end our marriage, it forced me to redefine who I was. For years, I had been so focused on being the perfect husband, the stable provider, that I lost sight of myself. Her betrayal was a brutal wake-up call, but it also gave me the push I needed to reclaim my life. I won't say I'm grateful for what happened, no one should have to go through something like that. But I will say that I'm stronger for it. I've learned to set boundaries, to prioritize my own happiness, and to recognize the warning signs of unhealthy relationships. Most importantly, I've learned that forgiveness doesn't have to mean reconciliation. I've forgiven Emily not because she deserves it, but because I deserve peace. Holding on to anger would only keep me tethered to a past I've worked so hard to leave behind. As for Emily, I don't know where she is now. I heard through mutual friends that things didn't work out with Brian, but beyond that, I haven't kept tabs on her. Our lives have diverged completely, and I have no interest in looking back. What's next for me? I don't have all the answers yet, but for the first time in a long time, I'm okay with that. I've built a solid foundation for myself, one that isn't dependent on anyone else. And this time, I'm confident it won't crumble.